So that's going to be about a decent size. Notice how I was ghosting the shape by moving my, I could see it. You could see how big or little before I actually press down. And as I press down, I'm confirming and adjusting until I have a happy circle. And that will do it for me. There's a little adjustment here and a little one here. So I could easily do that. No need to erase ever. I use the eraser only as a drawing tool. Just kidding. Sometimes you can just clean up, but not to correct. It's the wrong way to think. You want to be always in a positive state of mind. So if you're using your eraser, it's not to, the word mistake should never even come into mind. It's to adjust or draw or clean up. So that's it. So we're going to do a technique that it's called cross-hatching. So what I want to show you is this. We did light direction. You guys remember this from last week? Light direction. So I could see it's coming this way. I could see it touches my object right here. And it should go right about here. So I'm going to draw my terminator, meaning I'm going to find my light and shadow shapes, but I'm going to keep this line very light as possible. And I'm also going to find, and again, right about here, my point for the cast shadow. And I'm going to go ahead and draw that in as well. Very loose. Watch your grip. You want to maintain a nice loose grip. I should have actually, considering the cast shadow, I have a little error in composition. I should have made it a little more to the right. I'm sorry. So this would be centered. But I'll live with it. And here we are. Once you're there, what I want you to do is this. So I'm going to work with diagonals. But just so you could see, I'm going to take refresher. Last week we took light shape, shadow shape. So all of this I'm going to kind of, let's call it color it in, but we're not really, just fill it in. So what I want you to do is pick a line. Now this line could be vertical line, and I'm talking vertical in relationship to the direction of the paper. It could be horizontal, or it could be diagonal, meaning this way. Notice my pencil. Or they could be diagonal, resembling the direction of the light. Does that make sense? So all of this shadow shape, I'm going to go with the direction of the light, diagonal. So I'm going to, the exercise that we just did, can you see it? I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more. And I really want to maintain consistency with the quality of the line, the value, meaning the darkness of the line, but also the spacing. I want to make sure. So here I'm going to have a little bit of pace. I'm going to be very aware of my pace. Most importantly, I want to keep the angle of the line. So it's pretty much like we did in the previous exercise, the warm-up exercise. But this time I'm dealing with the shape where I have a little bit of roundness right here at the end. Now I'm getting to a point where I'm going to switch camera again, so I can show you that. Notice that I'm reaching this point here that's going to continue into the shape. So I could just go ahead and bring that all the way through. All the way through. And I'm going to fill up. And maybe as I get to this area, I can go back. And I should have maybe continued. You could have done that, where the line's going this way here. And as I begin to see the shape coming in, I could have continued the line, interrupted right there, but maintaining the angle. So I'm going to go ahead and catch this up just with a couple of lines to give me that direction so I can maintain the angle. And now notice that I'm working right to left, left to right. As long as I'm in the same kind of direction, maintaining that consistency of space, isn't it amazing what you can start saying? The possibilities. Let's see if right here. Switch back over. There we are. So you could see the pace and the distance between the line. And now you're drawing. I mean, we've been drawing the whole time, but now you actually, your brain, oh, okay, now I'm drawing. So that's one of those things to be aware of too. Your thoughts. How you can loosen up or how you can tighten up. When, the thought of, I don't want to make a mistake comes in. Now, the other thing is if you're working left to right, in my case, as a right-hander, you may want to have a sheet of paper that you can, if you're laying your hand, so you don't smudge your lines that are on there already. And I'll show you from the other camera how that works. And one of the best papers for that is actually one of those that we use in the kitchen, which is that kind of waxy paper for like baking, because it barely lifts any graphite. But you could use any other type of paper. Like printer paper is what I use. And as I reach the end of it, we have that there. We go, wow, okay. We just went from line to shape to form, and you can begin to see kind of light direction because of the line we chose. Go ahead and sharpen this one more time and show you one more very quickly. And I'm back. Okay, so next, we're going to deal with a little shift in the light and darkness. So we can actually see areas of light. We could see how immediately right at the terminator it gets dark. But we could see areas where it gets a little lighter and then again darker. So I'm going to start with the cast shadow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply cross hatching. So for cross hatching, I'm going to do it over here on this side so you could see it. Cross hatching means I just did this direction of line. Let's see if you could see it closer. So I did this direction of line and I did a pattern that goes this way. So for hatching, what I do is, and I want to show you what I'm going to do with the pencils. So the line that I just drew here, I am going to do a second layer of hatching patterned lines. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift the angle just that much. So think about it, 10 degrees, 20 degrees, 30 degrees. Eventually, you could go all the way to 90 degrees. But that's going to look like a fence. You know, like one of those, like just a, quadricular kind of, too geometric. Here, what you're thinking is skinny X. You know, like the letter X, but very skinny. And the less you shift the angle, all of a sudden you forget about this first one. And what you do is you maintain this angle. I hope you can follow me so far. Let me go ahead and demonstrate. So I have my first angle. Let's go ahead and keep that pencil there. See if I could do it. So this is the first angle. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to come across and hatchet. So I'm adding a second layer. And you could see that this angle now, in relationship to the first, creates that X. So the way I hatch it, notice how it immediately begins to darken. It also begins to create kind of illusion of textures. So let me get ahead now so I don't interrupt the next stage. We had line number 1. This is line number 2. Line number 3, and I'm going to have to grab another pencil, would be this way. So the same angle we turn this way. The third layer would be in the opposite direction. So right here. Guess what the fourth one would be? You guessed it. It would be this way again. And little by little, we go all the way to 90 degrees. So usually it takes 3-4 layers of hatching for us to develop something like this. And also remember, you have darker pencils. So from HB, you could move up to 2B. I'm going to stay with the 2B, just so you could see the consistency. So again, I have this angle of line. So my first angle, I'm going to shift it this way. And I'm going to go right from the end. And I'm going to hatch it. Maintain your pace. And now you're focused on that second pattern, maintaining that angle all the way through. Just like we did with that early exercise. Now, as I reach the form, meaning the sphere, I'm going to begin to pay attention to the edge of it and kind of from the edge of it, maintain that line. Always paying attention to your line direction. And you always have that underneath layer to guide you. You see it as you're crossing. I remind you, really pay close attention to your grip. There we go. So immediately we see a difference. Can you see the difference? Give you a little closer look. There it goes. So I'm going to shift the camera over here so you can see it a little bit better. There we go. And it looks interesting already. So hatch number 3 would be, we did this direction. Now I crossed it this way. So my third one is really going to be across the first, meaning almost going all the way from here. So I'm going to plan it right from the edge. And that could be an interesting, tricky thing to make sure you have that right angle going across the first one. So I'm going to begin to go almost straight across the entire shape because of the angle of it. So here you see how that exercise helps us, because all of a sudden our lines become maybe a little longer than we're used to. But you could easily see underneath the layering of those lines. And there we go. Perfect. Now, one thing that I should mention as well. You could, I'm going to do it here. That first line we did, hatch, right here. If you could see it here at the bottom, right here. I could just do the same line over that one. And then again over that one. So I'm kind of hatching over the same line in the same direction. And that's 3. That's 4. That's 5. So that's another way of hatching. I could have done, really quickly, show you another one. first hatch this way. And then the second variation, which was first angle. And then repeat those two in the same angle. So you begin to get a feel of all these variables, variations. Maybe just do the one hatch pattern and do it 4 times. Maybe do 1 2 1 1 2 1 1 1 2 1 2 3 1 1 2 3. All these, it just becomes infinity. Your artistic license is what's going to tell you how. It's not what I'm showing you here. Oh, this is technically the most standard way that you would see, where you do 1 2 3 4 and then you're shifting the angle, but it's not necessarily it's not at all the only way. So I'm going to start repeating instead of crossing over, because my next line would be literally straight across like this. And I could begin to see that original thing I mentioned where we're coming almost perpendicular to that first line. But the main thing you want to pay attention to here is consistency. You don't want to get patchy, meaning, oh, I'll work over here a little bit and then shift the type of direction of line over here, because then you begin to have patches. So what I'm going to do for one more layer of this cast shadow is I'm going to go back to the original angle, that angle of the light, and I'm just going to add a second layer of it. Now, again, if you're working with different pencils, you could add a darker pencil too. So a second layer with a 2B, 4B, 6B would be perfectly timed here. But I could see that this is going to work just fine. There we go. And that's pretty much all I need. I mean, at some point, question, can I just add a little bit of darker here? Yes. So the cross-hatch patterns don't have to cover the entire thing. I could go just in here and make a smaller patch of hatch lines that just darken this area. Now, what I always want to see is the shape, meaning the shadow shape. And do you see how there's a variation, that little bit I just added here from the rest? So I don't want it to be patchy. There's going to be some sort of, unless that's the shape of the shadow, there's going to have to be some sort of transition. So you want to pay attention to that so you don't all of a sudden lose the feel of the overall work that you just set up. And again, this all happens the more practice with awareness, because you need to be aware of the decisions that you were making when you're laying down these lines in order to make sense of them after the fact, where you, oh my gosh, I love it. How did I do that? I don't remember. So make sure you do. Even taking notes, like I did over here on the side, maybe putting a couple marks of how you did some of the patterns. Okay, so I'm going to go right into my sphere in the middle here, and I'm just going to begin to develop hatch pattern number 2, but now I'm paying attention to the shape. So my eyes should be on my reference photo. So I'm looking at my screen almost 90 to 95% of the time. And I can trust, once I lay my pencil down, that what I'm seeing, I can actually interpret. What I do not want is to fix my eyes on my paper and just begin to lay down lines without understanding why. So I'm looking at that shape of the shadow and I'm beginning to add first layer, second layer. Now that I have that patch, I'm going to extend it just a little bit further out beyond that first shape so it transitions better. And now this one, the third one, so we had, 1, 2, 3. So actually this would be the fourth one. I'm going to go the opposite direction. So I'm going to go from the shadow into the light. So in a way, I could taper my line. And for those of you who don't know, taper means it starts dark and it could just, let me show you again on this camera. So it would be a pattern of lines that would look kind of like this. And they taper out. So you're pressing down and you lift the pencil, almost like the takeoff of an airplane. Like you have to think of runway and whoop, there it goes. And it just lightens out, feathers out towards the end. So you want some of that on some of these lines that I'm about to do here. So I'm looking at the pattern and question. Can my lines begin to curve like they would a ball? Absolutely. That's called contour hatching. So because I'm working with the ball, I kind of want to begin to follow the surface of the ball, but you should be careful because you really need to understand the actual surface for the curvature of the line. Because if you don't follow it precise, then your ball begins to look dented. So the type of curve that you're going to add here should feel like you're almost running your pencil on the surface of an actual sphere. And if you actually do that as an exercise, you get a sense of how your hand can mimic the type of line. So notice how I have a little bit of light. And now I'm going to just, again, cross hatch it in the opposite direction. So here is that thing I mentioned about the lines. If you curve them and they're not the precise, like if they're too curved, if they begin to look like the letter C, you can begin to have that denting feel where the light is not responding the way our brain would interpret it. And you loosen up, you begin to see the angles, but again, always keeping your eye and your understanding from your reference. There's a little more light variation right here at the bottom. So I'm going to add a couple of patterns, tapering it out towards the sides. So my lines begin to get shorter. And could they be dots? Yes, absolutely. In some areas, it could be just almost little tiny dots. Because it's a matter of the length, the darkness, but also the saturation. And I'm going to add a second layer here. And as I zoom out just a little bit, I'm going to erase this here, clean up my background so I can go ahead and work it in. So the first thing I see is this. And my horizon, basically. I'm going to go ahead and add it. And from that horizon, I'm going to develop my background. So this time I'm going bottom to top. Trying to maintain a nice clean pattern, direction. Now, I could have done the same type of line that I started with, the direction. Could I have done that? Yeah, absolutely. It would have made way more sense. So I'm going to go ahead and correct that. I'm going to start over again here and just go ahead and do this kind of line. And yes, I have a hatch there. I can rework it. So as I come here into the figure, into my subject, I get a little more careful. And as I reach the edges, as far as the full drawing goes, it does make more sense for the lines, for almost all the lines, to have that same direction. Now, does it have to? No. It's just an artistic choice. And yeah, absolutely. I'm glad I did that. I should consider making this background out back here. As you can see, it a little bit darker than the reflected light on my subject. So I'm going to create a second, same direction. Just a second layer of lines. And taper it out. Notice that I'm not doing just the outline, but letting the background kind of reveal the shape of it. And I'm just softening up, blending those lines in the background, the hatch, with a little bit of soft graphite there. And that'll do it. And then from here, we're going to continue. And same thing, right from the edge of that shape, I'm going to take it all the way with the same direction and maintaining a good pace. Nice and slow. Bringing it all the way through. Now, in order for me to make it look like there's more light on this side, and I did a double hatch on this side here, what I want to do is just distance, begin to create a very gradual space between the lines, or also work with the thickness, the thickness and the value of the line, so they become a little bit lighter. I feel we need one more hatch right here in the middle, just to get that full volume. So again, being careful, following the same direction without getting too patchy. And that looks great. Looks great for a sketch. Beautiful.